When you let them go, their avoidance turns into obsession. Let me ask you something. Have you ever chased someone who kept pulling away? Every time you showed interest, they got colder. Every time you leaned in, they leaned out. And just when you finally decided, I'm done, boom, they come running back. It's not magic, it's human psychology. You see, we often think that if we try harder, love harder, prove ourselves more, we'll win them over. But here's the truth. If someone is emotionally unavailable or avoidant, your pursuit only confirms their fear that connection equals pressure. But something powerful happens when you stop trying, when you stop over-explaining, stop begging, stop waiting, when you let them go, really let them go. It creates space, not just for them to feel your absence, but for you to feel your own worth again. Avoidant people often need to lose the comfort of your constant presence to realize what they had. Suddenly, the silence you leave behind is louder than your words ever were, and what was once unbothered turns into late-night texts, old selfies revisited, and likes on photos from 42 weeks ago. Because now you're not chasing, you're choosing. And that shift, that's where the obsession begins. But don't do it for their attention. Do it for your sanity, your power. Because when you reclaim your energy, their confusion grows. You're no longer a guarantee. You're a mystery. And people don't obsess over what's available. They obsess over what's valuable. When you're dealing with someone who's emotionally avoidant, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that if you just try a little harder, love a little louder, or prove yourself a bit more, they'll finally let their guard down and meet you halfway. You might start texting more, asking them what's wrong, initiating plans, or trying to get them to talk about their feelings. But what often happens instead? They pull back even further. The more you reach out, the more they retreat. And it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because their wiring interprets your emotional closeness as pressure, not connection. For someone who is avoidant, intimacy can feel threatening, not because they don't want love, but because love comes with expectations, vulnerability, compromise, presence. That can feel overwhelming for someone who is used to relying on distance as a coping mechanism. So when you show them your love and attention, when you try to get closer, they may not see it as affection. They may experience it as control, even if that's the furthest thing from your intention. This is where many people start blaming themselves. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I need to tone it down. Maybe if I just give them a little more time, they'll come around. But the issue isn't your intensity, it's their fear. And here's the paradox. The more consistently you pursue them to ease that fear, the more you validate it. It confirms their subconscious belief that closeness equals pressure and that relationships are things to escape, not embrace. Your effort becomes the very thing that keeps them distant. It's like trying to hug a shadow. The harder you chase it, the more it slips away. What's even more painful is that your intentions are likely coming from a pure place. You're showing up because you care. You're being available because you see potential. But with an avoidant person, availability doesn't translate to safety. It triggers their defense. And the more you try to prove your worth, the less they feel the need to reciprocate. They don't have to work for your attention because it's already there all the time, no matter how little they give back. The dynamic starts to feel unbalanced. You begin to feel anxious, confused, and maybe even resentful. You're putting in all the effort, and it feels like they're doing the bare minimum. That's the emotional toll of chasing someone who is not emotionally ready to be caught. And ironically, the only way to shift this dynamic isn't to do more, it's to do less. The less you chase, the more room there is for them to come toward you of their own volition. And if they don't, you've saved yourself from investing deeper into someone who's not emotionally available in the first place. Letting go isn't about playing games or pretending you don't care. It's about creating space emotionally, mentally, even physically, that allows both people to step back and see things more clearly. When you're constantly present, always initiating, always available, the other person never gets a chance to truly miss you or even evaluate what your presence means to them. They never have to consider what life would feel like without your emotional support, your energy, or your effort. You become a given. And unfortunately, human nature often underappreciates what is always guaranteed. Space introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty creates curiosity. When you let someone go, when you stop texting first, when you stop checking in, when you stop showing up in ways that they've come to expect, they notice. It may not be immediate. It may not look like a dramatic realization, but internally, something shifts. They begin to ask questions. Why haven't I heard from them? Did something change? Are they over me? That mental chatter is the beginning of awareness. Not necessarily awareness of losing you entirely, but awareness of what your presence actually contributed to their life. People in avoidant patterns often need space, not just to process their feelings, but to feel anything at all. When they are constantly given connection, there's no friction. But when that connection stops, suddenly there's a contrast. The silence speaks volumes. The empty space you leave behind starts to echo with the memory of your energy, your attention, your care. Creating emotional space doesn't mean disappearing or stonewalling. It means withdrawing your energy from a dynamic that has become one-sided. It's about reclaiming the effort you've been pouring into someone who wasn't meeting you halfway. And what that does on a psychological level is reset the emotional playing field. It signals that you're no longer available unconditionally and that your presence is something to be earned, not assumed. That's powerful. That changes the dynamic. For someone avoidant who has learned to stay in control by keeping others at arm's length, this shift can be disorienting. They're used to people chasing them, trying to fix things, trying to decode their silence. When you stop doing all of that, they're forced to sit with the space you've left. And that space can stir feelings they've been avoiding. Regret, longing, uncertainty. That space can ignite a spark of realization. And sometimes that spark grows into a genuine desire to come closer, not out of guilt or obligation, but out of true interest. But even if it doesn't, that space is still valuable, because while it gives them a chance to reflect, it also gives you the clarity to see what you truly deserve. You stop running on autopilot and you start evaluating if this person actually enriches your life. That's the unexpected power of letting go. It transforms the energy of pursuit into the energy of presence, yours. Silence is often misunderstood in relationships. We tend to believe that words are what make the biggest impact. that explaining ourselves, expressing our pain, or demanding clarity will lead to resolution. But in many situations, especially with someone who is avoidant or emotionally unavailable, silence carries a weight that words simply... It's not just the absence of communication, it's the presence of a boundary. It's the moment when you stop trying to convince someone of your worth and start showing it instead. When you've been the one always reaching out, always trying to bridge the emotional gap, your silence is not just unusual, it's unsettling to the other person. They're used to the rhythm of your effort. They're used to your check-ins, your kindness, your patience. Even if they didn't acknowledge it, they relied on it. So when that pattern stops, it doesn't go unnoticed. Your silence creates a void, and that void begins to speak. It says, I am no longer available for one-sided love. I am no longer willing to beg for crumbs. I've said enough. Now it's your turn. For someone who is avoidant, a direct conversations about feelings can feel threatening or overwhelming. They often retreat the moment things get too real. They might shut down, deflect, or simply disappear. And when you chase them in those moments, trying to fix things or reopen the dialogue, you unknowingly reinforce their behavior. You teach them that they can withdraw without consequences, that your love is unconditional, even in the absence of effort. But when you respond with silence, you interrupt that cycle. You don't punish them, you simply stop participating in the dynamic. And it's in that silence that something powerful happens. Reflection. Not just on your part, but on theirs too. They begin to notice the shift, the daily text that didn't come, the comment you didn't leave, the phone that didn't ring. And because you're no longer trying to explain yourself, they're left to wonder, to feel, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing what you're thinking. And that discomfort can lead to the very thing they've been avoiding, emotional engagement. Silence forces someone to confront the impact of their behavior without you spelling it out for them. It gives them the space to realize what your presence actually meant. It allows them to feel the loss in a way words never could. And most importantly, it returns the focus back to you. When you go quiet, not to manipulate, but to protect your peace, you reclaim your power. You stop spending energy on someone who couldn't hear you when you were speaking your truth. In a world where constant communication is expected, silence becomes sacred. It's a quiet declaration that you deserve more than confusion and emotional distance. It's not about giving up. It's about giving yourself back to yourself. And often, the person who couldn't hear your words will hear your silence loud and clear. It's a strange truth in life that we often don't fully recognize the value of something until it's gone. This applies deeply to relationships, especially when one person is consistently giving while the other is passively receiving. When you're always present, always available, always showing up for someone emotionally, it's easy for them to take that presence for granted. They stop noticing the little things you do. They stop appreciating your effort. Not because they're unkind, but because they've never had to imagine a version of life without it. When someone doesn't have to earn your attention, it can start to feel less meaningful. Familiarity can breed complacency. You become a constant, and constants are often undervalued until they're no longer there. That's the moment reality starts to set in. The daily text that always came no longer does. The consistent check-ins suddenly stop. The emotional support they relied on disappears. And in that quiet absence, they're left to feel the weight of what they've lost. Avoidant individuals in particular have a complicated relationship with closeness. They may feel smothered by attention, even when it comes from a healthy place. But once that attention vanishes, they begin to feel the space left behind, and that space can feel colder than they expected. It's in that stillness they begin to reflect, not just on your absence, but on how they showed up when you were there. It's no longer theoretical. It's not a maybe one day you'll leave thought. It's real. You're gone, and they don't know if you're coming back. That's when avoidance turns into awareness. They start replaying moments in their mind, things you said, gestures you made, the way you were always patient, the way you kept showing up even when it wasn't easy. Suddenly, all those things they brushed off become significant. They begin to feel the shift, the loss. And with loss comes clarity. People value what they have to earn, not what is handed to them without effort. When you're always available, someone doesn't have to consider your emotional needs. They just expect you to be there. But when you take a step back, not to punish, but to preserve yourself, you disrupt that pattern. You give them a chance to feel the absence of what they were once so certain of. And that absence can awaken emotions they didn't know were buried. Regret, desire, fear of losing you. But here's what's important. The realization doesn't always come immediately, and it doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. A sudden like on an old photo, a message out of the blue, a quiet shift in how they talk to you, as if they've realized they're no longer on steady ground with you. That shift didn't happen because you yelled or demanded. It happened because your absence finally made them feel your value. What you give consistently begins to feel like a given until it's no longer there. And in that space, they start to see what they couldn't see before. Your presence was never guaranteed. It was a gift. Letting go is often mistaken for giving up, but they are not the same thing. Letting go is an act of strength, not surrender. It's the decision to stop pouring your time, your love, and your emotional energy into someone who is not giving you the same in return. And when it comes to someone who is avoidant, someone who runs from closeness, who can't or won't meet you emotionally, the temptation is strong to hold on even tighter, to think that if you can just love them a little more, they'll finally feel safe enough to open up. But that's not how emotional connection works. You cannot force someone to be ready for the kind of love you have to give. So the shift has to happen within you. Instead of letting go to provoke a reaction, to make them miss you, or to create space in the hope that they come back. What if you let go purely for your own peace? What if you chose to walk away, not to teach them a lesson, but because you finally learned yours, that your time is precious, that your love is powerful, that your energy deserves to be met, not drained? This is what real growth looks like. Reaching a point where your self-worth is no longer tied to how someone else sees you. You stop measuring your value by whether they call, text, or chase after you when you walk away. Instead, you realize that walking away is the win. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you care enough about yourself to stop waiting for someone who isn't emotionally capable of showing up. When you truly let go, not performatively, not temporarily, but completely, something powerful happens. You start showing up for yourself in ways you used to show up for them. The energy you spent analyzing their messages, planning how to keep them engaged, worrying about how to fix the distance between you, it's now redirected into healing, growth, and clarity. You begin to see the emotional roller coaster for what it was. Not passion, but imbalance. Not chemistry, but inconsistency. And here's the irony. It's often only when you let go for you that they start to notice, because you're no longer available in the way you once were. You're not waiting around for breadcrumbs of affection. You've removed yourself from the dynamic, and suddenly they're faced with the consequences of their emotional avoidance. But by that point, your peace matters more than their delayed attention. Letting go is not about revenge. It's not about getting them to chase you. It's about reclaiming your dignity, your emotional space, and your right to be in a relationship where love doesn't feel like work. It's the moment you stop auditioning and start choosing. Choosing yourself. Choosing people who don't need to lose you to realize your worth. And once you've made that shift, their obsession is no longer your concern because you've already moved on to something better. Your own healing, your own joy, and your own freedom. Thank you.